Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's official. Crota's End is the reprised raid returning September 1st, 2023. John Bungie has blessed us with yet another masterpiece. Here's how to prepare for it. If you haven't played the game in a while, don't worry. Power doesn't matter. You'll need to be at least 1790 cap for all the encounters. That means you and your buddies haven't played for a while, first time getting on since the launch of Lightfall, you'll be perfectly fine. Not that big of a deal at all. The raid contest mode is going to be 48 hours long, so be prepared with your energy drinks, food, everything that you need to get through potentially 48 hours of raiding, though I suspect for most serious teams it won't take more than 24 hours considering the relative power level of the previous two reprise raids, Vault of Glass, King's Fall, and approximately how long those took for most of the top-end teams or even mid-table teams to complete. It's not going to be as easy as Root of Nightmares. However, it's not going to be as hard as Spire of Stars, which is a interestingly large difficulty comparison. Now, there was some tuning changes to contest mode. Essentially, player damage is capped as outgoing versus combatants. Incoming damage cap isn't changed whatsoever. More enemies are going to have elemental shields, and AI enemies are going to be way more aggressive than in previous contest modes, so be prepared to get bum rushed and charged by every melee enemy on the planet, grenade spamming goodness that we know and love. Important reminder, the damage a player is taking is not changed. The only thing that's changing is outgoing damage and damage caps for specific enemies, meaning you're potentially dealing 20% less damage than you think you're going to deal based on the way the scaling works. So damage resistance, DT, it's all going to be perpetually useful as it always is. If you've not done any bounty grinding, don't worry, it really doesn't matter. Most of the artifact mods this season are hot garbage. You have your standard anti-champion, auto rifle, bow, scout, hand cannon, etc. mods. Those have always been there. There's plenty of utility, plenty of ways to get anti-champion. There will be champions in the second run of Crota's End because it's two runs, the initial run and then the challenge run. And apart from that, you have your standard siphon mods. There's some new interesting things for elemental orbs. For Void, Arc, Solar. They do look interesting. There's certain build crafting components that are possible with these orbs, considering that you essentially get a free blast of elemental energy damage based off of the subclass damage type that you're using that can apply various effects to enemies. And also there's a mod in the fourth column, refreshing pickups, that every time you pick up an elemental orb you get ability cooldown. There's some really interesting builds that can happen where you can have infinite ability spam as long as you keep on continuing to pick up the orbs and throw them. But other than that, the fifth column of artifact perks, don't kill yourself grinding. It's not worth it. The most worthwhile one there is Monochromatic Maestro. We've had it before. It's not any better now. The 10% damage resistance is essentially negligible. It's just not anything to worry about whatsoever. Besides the XP farm in the grinding for the artifact mods, which even though I don't think is worth it, it's still a good thing to do. Any players seriously considering doing a day one need to bring the right items in with them. There's a chance that apps like Destiny Item Manager aren't going to work. Bungie has disabled the API for the raid races before, for instances where it completely breaks the game, so be prepared for that. I'm going to go over what I think the three classes should be bringing in and what I'm personally bringing in since I'm playing a hunter in my raid team for this day one raid race. Starting off with primary weapons, this is what my inventory is going to be looking like for the day one. I'm bringing in as follows: Conditional Finality, Arbalist, Quicksilver, Heritage, Pardon Our Dust, Witherhoard, Outbreak, Perfected, Malfeasance, Izanagi's Burden, and Touch of Malice. Some other weapons to consider are things like Chill Clip, Riptide, Succession, Fatebringer, In further exotic primaries I didn't mention, I can see things like Crimson and Illumina having some level of usefulness, along with Monte Carlo, depending on how much the Catalyst is going to be a factor in this. Same thing with Osteostraga for the crowd control. But these 10 kinetic weapons in my inventory are what I'm going to be bringing in. Most of my other team members are bringing the same things. The only things that differs, like I said, the Riptides, Thoughtless, Malicious Birthright, Last Wish Sniper Rifle, the Supremacy. These are the weapons that I feel have a place on any and all competitive Day 1 teams. Stay away from gimmick weapons. I don't like the idea of using Bad Juju or using Rat King unless you want to be really funky, depending on how easy the raid is. Or the Navigator even, then the Woven Mail. Easier ways to get Woven Mail than by wasting your exotic slot on the Navigator. For special weapons, I'm doing this as a just in case. I don't anticipate that I'm going to be running exotic special weapons. Primarily, I believe I'm going to be using Funnel Web and Nessa's Obligation of Forbearance. Those are just the 3 things that seem like they have the most use to me. I also have the Ecliptic Distaff, the Void Pinnacle Glaive from 2 seasons ago. I'm going to be running a Void build most of the time, so having a Void Glaive is going to be of the most use to me. But other than that, Sunshot, Risk Runner, Divinity, Vex Caliber. I'm bringing in X-Dearest, also the brand new Season Pass grenade launcher, because it has some interesting interactions with the new pair of Hunter gauntlets that just got released this season, the Mothkeeper app. So I'm going to see if that has any level of usefulness for the raid. Primarily, we're looking at Arc and Solar damage type for shields. Wizards and Hive Knights have those 2 shield types primarily. I don't think we're going to be seeing any Arc shields unless they do something really, really funny when they do the switch up for the challenge mode. And there's a whole suite of legendary weapons you could bring to Nessa's Obligation, Callus Mini Tool, Seraph SMG, First and Last Out, Plan C, potentially 4th Horseman if there's corridor room for those. Age-Old Bond is something else too. Weapons that my teammates are bringing in, but I think that the ones that I have in my inventory currently are going to be the most useful for most players, considering their ease of getting, being mostly exotic. But the main thing you want to consider is the Arc and the Solar Shields as the damage types for this raid. Now on to heavy weapons, which I think is going to be the least complicated part about my build specifically. The 2 that I'm going to be using most of the time is going to be Commemoration and Apex Predator. The Commemoration because it allows me to do my funny Void builds where I can stay invisible forever using volatile rounds from Gear Falcon's Hoybjerg, and Apex Predator because, as the damage numbers suggest, it's currently the best rocket launcher in the entire game for damage. So those are the 2 things that are staying on the entire time. Along with the rest of my inventory, I'm bringing Cataclysmic, Leviathan's Breath, Gallowhorn, Tractor Cannon, and Anarchy just in case. I don't see myself committing an exotic slot to a heavy weapon when I have much more utility using the primary and secondary exotic weapons. Having a good sword for mobility purposes like Other Edge or have Truths with the Eager Edge perk on it is also something that is advisable, as long as with the new and improved Salvation script. It is a surprisingly good gun for both stopping enemies and generating a just absolutely insane amount of cover. There's some merit to bringing things like Sleeper Simulant and Thunderlord. It really just depends on the ranges and the shield type of the enemies, or if they're things that are easily one-shot. It's some stuff that has to be experimented with as of the day of. Along with that, there's a couple grenade launchers that you might want to consider. The Regnant, Crime Mutiny if you don't have a good Regnant. Also, Wendigo GL3, the Adept one. You get one of those with Explosive Light and Field Prep, and you should be fine and dandy. Retrofit Escapade, Zero was just selling, or the Gunsmith was just selling a good roll with 4 times target lock. I don't think anybody in their right mind should be using that weapon, but who knows. Cold Comfort, the new dungeon rocket launcher, has some fantastic perks, and it has some incredible potential. However, Chill Clip got nerfed a little bit, so I'm hesitant to include that in inventories over things like the Apex Predator. But then again, it's something we'll just have to see, do more testing on between now and September 1st. Now that I covered guns, me and my team are going to be taken into the raid. I just want to go over some armor. Obviously, you want high stat rolls. Being double 100 in two of your main stats is going to be peak. Ideally, everybody should be running 100 resilience at all times, unless you have a way to generate some crazy level to damage resistance. But just having 100 resilience is just the easiest thing to do. Starting off with Hunter helmets, there are three that require serious consideration, being Assassin's Cowl, Celestial, Nighthawk, and Wormhusk Crown. Assassin's Cowl, mainly just for the invisibility and health regen upon melee kills, especially during the Thrallway. Same deal with the Wormhusk Crown, dodging to immediately get your health boost, and Celestial Nighthawk is probably just one of the best workhorse exotics in the game. You get one single big fuck off enemy and send them right to the grave. It'll be useful. I don't know. For gloves, as always, Aeon Swift are going to be key for any and all fire teams to keep the heavy ammo flowing because of the new changes. I'm also bringing Shinobu's Vow and Shards of Galanor. I think that those are going to be the best ones. I'm also taking in with me Triton's Vice, and I need to farm a good pair of Mothkeeper's Wraps, so I can go in with one of those just so I can have a set of good arms. I'm probably, if I'm going to be using arms, I'm probably going to be using Shinobu's Vow. I have grenade builds that I run that aren't as good as they were last season. However, there's still a little bit of utility when it comes with the combination with the artifact mod Monochromatic Maestro, despite what I talked about earlier. For Hunter chest pieces, the only two things I want to hear coming out of anybody's mouth is Gerfalcon's Hoibjörk and Omni Oculus. For obvious reasons, Gerfalcon's Hoibjörk is probably the best hunter exotic in the game currently. Just being able to infinitely chain invisibility and volatile, just with a void heavy machine gun, it's just so ridiculous right now. And being able to use things like Funnel Web or Ecliptic Distaff or even Vexcalibur, things like that, void exotic weapons, it's just, the utility of it is just unmatched. Apart from Gerfalcon's Hoibjörk and Omni Oculus, might want to run Raid and Flux, maybe Raiju's Harness. Other than that, Arc Staff could be useful in certain sections, but if you're running Arc Staff in this current meta, you're really not doing a whole heck of a lot of things for your team. For boots, exotic boots, it's obligatory Stompies, just for any jumping sections. Crota doesn't have any jumping sections, but just to make it easier for mobility purposes, every hunter should have a pair of them. Same thing, Star Eater Scales. It is one of the best ways to get damage in the entire game. We don't know if there's going to be another encounter or a different boss besides Ariute and Crota, and we also don't know how the Crota damage mechanics going to work. It could function identical to D1, however, it couldn't. I'm also going to be running Gemini Jester, really just for the mass disorienting effect field that it has. Stunning enemies, melee units that come close to you, has a lot of usefulness to it. Moving on to Titan armor, the same legendary rules apply. Just have armor with good stats that support the build you're trying to be running, and just make sure that you have 100 resilience. It's just the easiest way to play the game. That's just what the meta is currently. When we're looking at Titan exotic helmets, Helmsame 14, Lorelei Splendor Helm are probably going to be the only two that any reasonable person should even consider using. Helmsame 14 just for the blinding effect on the Ward of Dawn, the Lorelei Splendor Helm just for the sunspots and the essentially infinite regeneration. It is just a really good build right now. Solar builds are in a solid spot as we speak. For Titan gauntlets, we're looking at three things. We're looking at Syntheseps, Aeon Safe, and the brand new Pyrogale gauntlets. If you don't have them yet, I'm sorry, get them. They're really good. Syntheseps are always good for melee. There's some crazy builds available. Aeon Safe's exclusively just for the heavy ammo. There's never anything wrong with getting heavy ammo ever. And Pyrogale gauntlets, the functionality of them turning your Burning Ball and Consecration into just better Cyclones, and the Burning Maul specifically, it currently does more damage than a Nighthawk Golden Gun to the right targets, so it is going to be awesome for just nuking just the biggest and baddest things. It's going to be better than Thunder Crash in the raid. Titan chest pieces, you're looking at the following: Armamentarium, Cresta Alpha Lupi, Curse of Falling Stars. Heart of Inmost Light. Heart of Inmost Light isn't as good as it used to be. Curse of Falling Stars, just to have the arc flying Thunder Crash, it's fairly good. Armamentarium, probably on the weaker end, but there's nothing wrong with having extra grenades, especially with the amount of crowd control that's needed in this particular raid. And Cresta Alpha Lupi, being able to heal from Barricade and just having more orbs for the team is fine. I don't think Cresta Alpha Lupi should see any serious use, but it is something to consider. The same thing with Hellfire Heart, but if you're running Hellfire Heart, you might as well just be running Lorelei Splendor Helm. It doesn't do the same thing, but it makes solar builds better. Moving on to leg armor, there really isn't anything besides Lion Rampart for any potential mobility sections. You can make an argument where Phoenix Cradle is going to be useful just for the ability to grant allies sunspots, but there's other ways for allies to get a lot of regeneration for their health, so I don't know if Phoenix Cradle is advisable in this situation. The exotic leg choice for Titans is kind of weak at the moment in the current meta. That's PvE, so the previous section should be considered before those. Now, finishing off with the Warlocks, I'll say it one time just to drill it in. When build crafting, you're going for a minimum 100 resilience plus one other stat that you think is going to be useful. A lot of players use discipline. A lot of players use recovery just for the increased generation of rifts. A lot of players use intellect. Really, mobility and strength aren't important. Just pick two to get 100 and go from there. There's only a single exotic helmet for Warlocks that a serious player should even begin to consider, and that's Cenotaph Mask, the new helmet from Season of the Deep. It just makes trace rifles better, generates heavy ammo whenever you mark and kill enemies. It's just a solid support option that has a little bit more offense to it for your teammates that are running trace rifles. Some might say Verity's Brow or Crown of Tempest or even Nezarek's Sin if you're looking at the amount of crowd control that's needed or just the sheer damage output that Verity's Brow is able to produce. I'm under the impression, for everything I know for this raid, that Verity's Brow isn't going to be useful just because the way damage on the bosses works. And for Crown of Tempest and Nezarek's Sin, crowd control comes in better formats. The Warlocks are best to use in a support capacity, using things like the Cenotaph Mask. For exotic gauntlets, the final of the trio, Aeon's Soul, heavy ammo is just so useful. Having it, one person running it on the fire team would be fine, even though for Warlocks, you're probably not going to be running your Aeon Soul. That might fall the responsibility of the Hunter or the Titan, but other than that, Sun Bracers and Necrotic Grip, if you're using Osteostraga builds, are going to be the only useful exotic Warlock gauntlets that you're going to be looking at. It's kind of taken a back seat in recent seasons, but Starfire Protocol, it's just okay. Phoenix Protocol nowadays generates way more everything than Starfire Protocol does. If you're using an exotic chess piece, I'd say you're throwing. However, Starfire Protocol, you can throw them fusion grenades, fusion protocol. You know, more supers is never a bad thing. Now for boots, there's the one and only, the obvious, the best pair of boots in the entire game, Geomag Stabilizers. I say that in jest, however, Chaos Reach, there's some new builds that you can do with the artifacts this season, getting Arc Orbs and Arc Energy. There's a lot of ways to generate supers. Rain of Fire as well. The ability to become Radiant on command with a Linear Fusion Rifle or Fusion Rifle Final Blows is just crazy. And I'm not going to say the obvious, but I will anyway. Lunafaction boots, transversive steps. It's a no-brainer. Take those with you. If you're a Warlock and you don't have those, you shouldn't be playing the game anymore unless you don't own them, in which case go get them. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up on prep teams can do. I'm going for Worlds First. Everybody's going for Worlds First. Minimum, want to get done in 24 hours. I'd like to get done sub 16 hours. That's about how long it took my fire team to complete King's Fall. It took 18 hours to do Vault of Glass, but those are the first 2 times I was running with this group of guys. We have a good group. We've done the last 4, so I think we're going to do okay. Going for a high placement this time because Crota's End shouldn't be the most difficult thing in the entire world. Apart from that, Take care of yourself. Your health is way more important than this raid. The raid starts Friday, September 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern, and it ends Sunday, September 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern. The raid race runs for 48 hours. Just know you have 48 hours to complete both the regular mode and the contest mode. If you're not going for placements and your team can get done with the first part of the raid, the first run of the raid within 24 hours, it might be worth it to just take a break, go to bed, wake up refreshed, come to the next thing. Come to play the next day. It is useless to bang your head against the wall for results that aren't going to happen. Take care of yourself, and remember, keep a good mentality. There's nothing that destroys raid teams faster than people being toxic or people not taking responsibility. Take responsibility for your actions. Hold your teammates accountable. Hold your fire team accountable. Make sure that everybody's doing what they need to do when they need to be doing it. And remember, be patient. Even though this is a reprised raid, it is still difficult. These things are difficult to the wildest imagination. Vow of the Disciple, King's Fall, Vault of Glass, Deep Stone Crypt, those were all tremendously difficult experiences. People assume that because Root of Nightmares was an easier time that this one is going to be a cakewalk. Do not be fooled. Be prepared for the worst and make sure that your mental is prepared to potentially sitting away and grinding at this thing for 48 hours. Just remembered, be prepared, stay safe, and take care of yourself, and most importantly, have fun. Thank y'all for listening.